We're certainly hoping it kicks off a great year for the company, because the last one has been a particularly tough one. I know we're not alone in that current economic circumstances around the world are making it tough for most people, but we've had a few sector-specific issues as well, given about 70% of our effort in recent years has been on uranium. And post-Fukushima in March, sentiment for uranium absolutely disappeared. And so we were fortunate that we had a fairly diverse portfolio. And so during 2011, we had to do a fair bit of rejigging, a bit of reprioritising some of our projects, and pushed a few of our copper and gold projects up to the list, because simply the market didn't want to know about a uranium story, despite the fact that we and many others still favour the fundamentals for uranium in the longer term. As a junior explorer, we have to face the realities of what the ASX market's telling us. So we're still very firm believers in uranium, and we have some great uranium projects, but tonight I'll also be talking about some of the copper and gold projects which have been advancing in recent times. So we'll see how we go getting the controls working. I'll flick to that pretty quickly. I think most of you know what these things mean. And our market capitalisation and market structure, we have around 155 million shares on issue, which isn't too bad for a company that's been around since about 2000. We've kept things pretty tight, and haven't had to issue too many shares to remain very active in the field. Our current market cap is around $25 million, and we had $5 million in cash in the bank at the end of the last quarter. Our major shareholder is the company's former chairman and founder, Phil Crabb, for his private company, Ragged Range. Beyond that, we have a couple of corporates who are there as a legacy of past JVs, and also a few small institutions which make up the top 10 of their shareholder base. So we've been pretty stable in the top 20 in recent times. Our projects are situated in the West Australia and the Northern Territory. The company had its roots in the Kimberley region, around there, back in about 2000, and we still retain a wholly owned Rosewood copper project, the Frank Hill copper project, and various other interests in JV with Panoramic Resources, including the Copernicus nickel mine, which we discovered a number of years ago, and JV with them in order to use their processing facilities. We also have major land holdings in the Northern Territory, and as I said, probably about 70% of our effort in the last few years has been on our uranium interests in the Pine Creek Origin and Nalia Basin of the Northern Territory. But the Pine Creek Origin also has a good endowment for copper and gold, and more recently we've been pushing some of those projects up the ladder, as I said. In Western Australia, we also have the Pyramid Base Metals project in the West Pilbara, which is one we've just got some recent results in, and we're pretty pleased with the success of that one. And we've also have a significant land holding in the Doolgunna region, or the Bry Basin, that Sandfire made famous a couple of years ago for the discovery of that fantastic deposit. And so that's where I'll go to begin with, is the Western Australia and our Doolgunna region tenements. In fact, that slide we're looking at now is the Gossan at our Red Hill project, which is next door to Sandfire's tenements. That pile of rocks there is a Gossan. I'm a mining engineer, not a geo, so it's hard for me to get too excited about a pile of rocks like that, but our geos got pretty excited when they saw that one. And it has proven to be pretty interesting based on the work we've done in that area since then. If you look at where that sits relative to Sandfire, this shows a number of our tenements in the Bry Basin and Doolgunna region, where we've got about 13 tenements in all, totalling around 1,500 square kilometres. But most of our work has been on this Red Boar tenement here, and also the Carrara Well tenement in recent times. And as you can see, Red Boar sits right within Sandfire Resources tenure, where they made the discovery of the De Grassi deposit around 2 years ago. And to zoom in on that, you can see just how close we are. But this wasn't a neurology play. That tenement is not there because Doolgunna was found. That tenement was there actually about 20 years before Doolgunna was found. And the reason for it was that Gossan we saw on the opening slide there, and that it was originally identified by the pastoralists. WMC came in there, did a little bit of work in the late 60s, and then they raced off to chase nickel in Kambalda and Windara, and it's pretty much left alone beyond that. And it's been held by the same prospect for the last 20 years till we did a deal to earn a 60% interest in it a couple of years ago in 2010. But the northern boundary of our tenement is only about 200 metres away from Sandfire Resources deposits, where they've defined now a total of around 14 million tonnes, going about 5% copper and around 2 grams per tonne of gold. It certainly is one of the most exciting discoveries it's made in the state or in the country for some years now. And you know, Thundelarra is a junior explorer, and if you ever ask yourself why you're an exploration company, our neighbours at Sandfire have answered that question very admirably. About 2 years ago, they were trading around 8 cents. They're trading at about $8 now in rough terms, and so if you had invested 10 grand with them a couple of years ago, you'd be sitting on $1 million now. That's why you invest in companies like Thundelarra or Adelaide Resources, for that matter. Anyway, the work we've done here initially focused on the Gossan region in the central part of the tenement. We drilled a number of RC holes on a grid pattern beneath the Gossan and hit sulphide mineralisation almost straight away, which was quite a surprise. Hole number 3 hit massive sulphide mineralisation, which was beyond our expectations, even though we thought it was a great target. We've also done a fair bit of geophysics on the tenement, everything from IP to EM to gravity, magnetics, and we've drilled a couple of those tenements and hit some anomalous copper, but nothing too exciting. We've also found another Gossan in the northwest corner, which is fairly close to Sandfire's tenement. There's 2 main horizons that are of exploration interest to us at the moment. One is this structural corridor that runs from the Conductor 5 deposit at Sandfires through the northwest Gossan and through the Red Ball Gossan. The other is this line through here, which is this plane that we've interpreted from our drilling to be a prospective horizon that's associated with Red Ball mineralisation. To look in cross-section at some of our drilling at Red Ball, we, as I said, got very excited when we started drilling this thing, and said hole 3, I think it was, hit the first massive sulphide intercept. Hole number 5 hit 17 metres at almost 12% copper and almost 2 grams per tonne of gold. And so we all got pretty excited about that one, including the market as a whole. It sent our share price up to just over $1 very briefly there. And we thought, this is it, we're on the way now. Unfortunately, as you can see by this section, below that intercept, it tended to feather out. We had a number of good hits along strike from this, but at depth, it simply didn't persist. And what we've seen is it go down into fairly thin, stringery type mineralisation. However, we're still highly encouraged by this. The type of mineralisation we're seeing is almost identical to what Sandfire have. We've been over and had a look at theirs, they've been over and had a look at ours, and it's the same type of VMS massive sulphides. It's got the same minor element geochemistry, it's got the same alteration halos, etc. And so we think we're correct in saying that we're the only ones in the Doolgunna district that have actually intersected the same style of mineralisation as Sandfire. The other factor that's worth noting is that between Sandfire's lenses of mineralisation, they also have thin string type mineralisation. So what we're hoping is that beyond this pot of mineralisation we've hit now, that we'll eventually pick up some more mineralisation. And what it's all about is this stuff here in the section. It's a bit hard to pick up on that slide, but you can see in the core, these are just massive sulphides there. And I said we're the only ones outside of Sandfire who have that in the region so far. If you look at a long section now along that plane I showed you in plan view, that basically shows all the drilling we've done on the prospective horizon, and all those little dots on the drill holes represent intersections of sulphide copper mineralisation. And so we're consistently hitting it. Virtually every hole we've drilled in that plane has hit sulphide mineralisation, including a couple of deeper ones there, which are around 450 to 500 metres below surface. People have said to me, so is that it then? You've drilled Red Ball and there's nothing there, time to move on? And what I want to emphasise in this slide is it's only just beginning. The limits of our tenement go from basically one slide to the other. And if I was to superimpose Sandfire's total deposits on at the same scale and the same depth from the surface, you can see there's still plenty of room to find the whole suite of deposits Sandfire have. What it takes now is just systematic deep drilling, and that is the conundrum that's facing Thundelarra at the moment. Each of these holes probably costs about $150,000 I should say, to drill those 600 metre deep holes there. To do this effectively, we need to pattern drill the whole tenement. And in the current economic climate, this is something we're a little bit hesitant to do. We will certainly slot this into our exploration schedule, but right at the moment, we can get far more bang for our dollars on some of the other prospects. And so Red Ball at the moment is in temporary pause, but it won't be for long, and it still remains a compelling story. If Sandfire had this, there'd be no doubt in the world they would have pattern drilled that tenement now. At surface, this was the best bit of ground in the whole district. It was the only one that had a Gossan like that, and so we've hit shallower sulphide mineralisation than else. So it's a compelling target, and one that we'll certainly be doing a lot of work on in time to come. But I guess more recently we've been working some of our other projects, and one of those is Pyramid, which is probably the newest of our projects, and I think it's the most recent one we've drilled. And this sits in the West Pilbara between Karratha and Port Hedland. And it's in a belt we've referred to as some mafic and felsic volcanic rocks that we've called the Wim Creek belt. And that's because further to the east there, we've got the Wim Creek deposit, which was the original copper mine in that district, mined about 100 years ago initially, and a number of other deposits that are now held by Director Resources, and they're doing a bankable feasibility into the recommencement of a mining operation there, and from all accounts that's stacking up very nicely. Thundelarra has a single tenement of about 125 square kilometres, about 40 kilometres to the west of Venturex's ground. Excuse me. And initially the attraction here was, again, another surface Gossan, a not particularly exciting one. It had quite low levels, about 2,000 to 3,000 ppm, copper, zinc and lead. but we did some ground EM over it and picked up a very distinct conductor directly beneath the gossan. And so that added to the fact that we're in a known VMS district. In addition to VentureX's deposits to the east, you've also got Fox Resources' Wandao copper deposit to the west. We felt it was a good chance of being mineralisation, but you never know. We've drilled plenty of EM targets that have proven to be just black shales or other elements of no economic concern. But in this case, we went in and drilled late last year in December, and we hit massive sulphides, predominantly pyrrhotite, but also some fairly good displays of sphalerite and chalcopyrite and a bit of galena, and there's quite good silver values there. So that was fantastic. It was confirmation this anomaly was a VMS deposit. Again, all the alteration and minor element characteristics suggest it's VMS mineralisation. A bit more prospecting on the tenement while the drilling was in progress. Picked up some fantastic rock chips at a prospect we're calling Copper Mine Bore, about 5 kilometres further to the east, and we've had up to 20% zinc, around 15% lead, percent of copper, and good silver values there, up to about 150 grams per tonne of silver. So that one we haven't drilled. We drilled one hole nearby there that probably went over the zone that represented by the surface mineralisation. But again, another pretty exciting discovery on this fairly greenfields tenement. We've also picked up another gossan through exploring the area. Most of the ground is under recent cover, and so there's no real outcrop to speak of. But to put this other gossan in perspective, we'll sort of zoom in on the area we're calling the Lightning Prospect. And what you're looking at now is a magnetic map, sorry, a gravity image. And you can see the area we've drilled there. We've picked up quite a few intercepts of the 6 holes drilled down the media area. There's 4 of them that hit good base metals mineralisation. But we believe that geophysics is representing a trend that possibly represents more sulphide mineralisation at depth. And it goes for about 2.4 kilometres just within the Lightning Project area where we've done the geophysics. In prospecting that, again, while the drilling is in place, we found another gossan, and it coincides very nicely. Again, we've had similar sort of base metals levels to what we had at original Lightning Prospect, in fact a little bit higher if anything else. So this is really pointing to the fact that we do have quite a significant target here for VMS style mineralisation that's barely been tested. And so that's one that's certainly rising to the priority list within the company. And when you add that to the rest of the tenure we have a total of 18 kilometres of strike there that is virtually totally untested by drilling. This is basically it. So it's one of our newest projects, but it's becoming one of our more exciting ones. Jumping up to the Kimberley, this is another pretty exciting project. I'm sorry if I keep repeating myself there, but it's hard not to get excited when you stumble across a lump of copper like that. We were in there doing our first reconnaissance at this project in Frank Hill up in the East Kimberley, and the geos virtually literally tripped over that. It's pretty all solid copper. The XRF indicated it was 99.5% copper. It's about 30 centimetres long. We couldn't work out what the hell it was at first. We thought it was some sort of artefact, and then we found a few more of them. And so we went in and did a bit of prospecting around the immediate region. And the map we're looking at now shows an EM survey going up through there. The big nugget was found down the bottom end of that line. But in walking the ground, I said we found a few other nuggets of copper at surface, and we also took some rock chips that was finding copper within the rock in situ. And so it wasn't just something that originated somewhere else. We believed we were sitting on the source of it. We applied to the West Australian government to get a grant when they introduced a subsidy scheme similar to the one that's been operating in South Australia for some time. And we got a grant to drill some RC holes in there, which we did in that particular area. And we intercepted significant visible native copper mineralisation at depth. We're talking about tens of metres where you could see visible native copper, in some holes up to virtually 100 metres where copper was visible. The peak assay was only about 1.8%, which was pretty interesting. But when you look at what the chips looked like, you can understand that. Those are lumps of native copper. They don't show up that clearly there. They would suggest that the grade's a lot higher than 1.8%, but it also suggests it'd be a bit of a nightmare to try and assay that, because when you're getting something as lumpy as that, it's going to be pretty difficult going through the lab. So it's a particularly interesting prospect. We've seen nothing like it in Australia. We don't have any good analogies here, but it is very analogous to Kieman ore deposits in Michigan that have produced around 15 billion pounds of copper from native copper in this same geological setting. And so again, this is very early days for us, and it's not a particularly easy project to push forward, because a lot of geophysics won't work. Certainly using EM probably isn't going to help us out at all, IP perhaps, and it's quite a big area to explore. But it's quite an interesting project of a potentially significant scale. While we're in the Kimberleys, we'll touch on briefly another early stage project. This is Rosewood, which is a bit to the north. We've been doing a little bit of initial reconnaissance there. We've been taking rock chips, and we've been getting some great copper values. I'm not sure if you can read the numbers, but up to sort of 24% copper there, along with elevated silver values. We flew EM over this tenement last year, and we picked up a number of quite discrete EM conductors, and some of those, particularly down this end, coincide quite nicely where we've got copper at surface. So we're interpreting the EM conductors to be potentially indicative of copper mineralisation at depth, but this is one that really hasn't been tested by drilling at this point, so it's a little early to call that, but again, quite an early stage, but an interesting project. One that's probably not going to be too high on our priority list because we've got, I guess, so many others that are a little bit further advanced. We've already got good drill intercepts that we can follow up. Jumping across to the territory. Pine Creek, as I said there, we're chasing uranium, copper and gold. I make no bones about the fact our original focus there was uranium. And the reason for that was that the Pine Creek is one of the world's premier uranium provinces, and it's also Australia's premier uranium province. It's where uranium mining started in the Rum Jungle field here back about 60 years ago. It hosts the Ranger deposit, which was, until I had some fairly serious wet season problems over the last couple of years, it was the world's second biggest uranium mine, and Australia's biggest uranium mine by a long way. It was producing about 12% of the world's uranium, and it's had a very significant history of uranium production. That's one of the things that also made it attractive for uranium exploration, because the Territorians have seen continuous uranium mining here for virtually 60 years, so it's very well accepted within the territory, not just by the government but also by the people. But the Pine Creek origin is also a significant gold field. There's been millions of ounces of gold defined within the Pine Creek origin, and it's also had a number of significant base metals occurrences. The other attribute it has, it's fantastically serviced by infrastructure. You've got the highway down to Darwin, between Darwin and Adelaide rather, the railway line, gas pipeline, port just up the road, only a comfortable 2 hours drive out of Darwin, so infrastructure-wise it's a great place to operate. We've got 3 project areas, Allamber, Hayes Creek and Mary River. Mary River's very early stage, which has been a bit of early stage reconnaissance there, but both at Hayes Creek and Allamber we've gone in and drilled a few of our targets there, and I'll talk about those in more detail now. In the Hayes Creek project area, we seem to have... Oh, no, that's it. We had some interesting success a couple of years ago. This was an area that had no reported uranium occurrences, but we felt was prospective, had all the right geology in the right location. And going into the Hayes Creek area, we've actually found now about 6 prospects that delivered ore-grade drill intercepts, and Thunderball was the first one of those. It's drilled some spectacular intercepts, up to 20% U3O8, some of the highest grade uranium we've reported in Australia. More recently, we've had a look at some gold within the Hayes Creek area at the Priscilla prospect. Over to Allamber, we've had some good copper intercepts lately at Hattrick, and down at Cliff South we've had both copper and uranium recent intercepts. So we'll start just quickly with Thunderball. We went into this region on the back of an airborne radiometric anomaly, and on the ground we found a few boulders that went up to about 2,000 ppm U3O8. So we decided to put some RC drill holes in, and about the second hole hit the discovery hole, about 3 metres at almost 3,000 ppm U3O8. The setting is basically a sedimentary package that's been folded and tilted to the north, so it's an antiform, and these the different colours here represent the different sedimentary units that have now, as I said, been folded up and tilted to the north. As we continued drilling, the intercepts got thicker and higher grade, and it got to the point where we're getting these massive intercepts, so up to 20% U3O8, and things like 15 metres at 1.5% uranium, and 12 metres at 6,000, 11 metres at 3.4%. If you're confused between the change between percents and ppm, once it gets to 10,000 ppm, we switch over to percents. And so, that's 34,000 ppm uranium, and the 20% stuff is 200,000 ppm U3O8. I said it's pretty spectacular grades. And what it's really based on is where the anticline has folded the stratigraphy. It's caused a lot of brecciation or faulting and fragmentation, and uranium mineralisation has filled that. So we've put a little resource around this, and we've got, there's 2 lenses of mineralisation there, the lower, which is in blue, and the upper, which we found further to the north. They are both in different units of the stratigraphy. The upper is typically thicker but lower grade, but nevertheless still quite good grades. And we've now got a JORC-compliant resource around both of those. There's still potential to extend this, particularly along the hinge, where you've had the most deformation and hence most uranium. And that's, I guess, shown most graphically if you look at some of the core that came out of Thunderball. If you look in here, it's hard to see the brecciation in this photo, but around the hinge here you've got these spectacular grades, 10s, 17s, 8s, 3s, and on the margins you've still got pretty healthy grades of uranium. And it's that hinge zone that we want to follow further to the north and down plunge in the ore body, which still remains totally open. And I want to emphasise that before we started exploring the Hayes Creek project there was no reported uranium occurrences. So this is a brand new virgin discovery. And so we've got 5 other prospects that we've now drilled and got ore grade intercepts within the same region. The uranium's a bit on the back burner at the moment, but we're certainly not walking away from our uranium project, so it offers fantastic potential for a commodity that we believe has a great long-term or medium-term future. Going over to the gold prospect in the same region, this is our Priscilla project, still within the Hayes Creek project area. You can see Thunderball sits down the bottom there. And within this red outline, we've got a group of mineral claims that we own 80% of in joint venture with Crocodile Gold, and we're running the exploration on that. A significant feature in the area is the fact that Crocodile Gold have the Princess Louise mine, which is a fairly significant operating gold mine right within that little niche within our tenure there. And that's set as one of their primary sources of feed to their plants in the Northern Territory at the moment. The other significant feature is that the fact that alluvial mining has been going on here, as long as a little bit of hard rock mining by the prospectors for many years. We picked this up off a group of prospectors, and part of the deal was we've allowed them to continue to do some alluvial mining there, which they're making a very good living out of. They're picking up, pockets of gold like that on a daily basis, and they can continue doing that as long as they don't get in our way. We can give them notice to move on, and so it's a win-win at the moment. And so it's a pretty impressive little prospect that until we got there had hardly any modern day exploration whatsoever. So we just got in there and just drilled our first pass RC program late last year. We followed the trend down from Princess Louise, and best intercept was 4 metres, about 4.6 grams per tonne of gold. And then there's another trend of mineralisation or potential mineralisation a little bit further to the southeast, which we also put some holes into, and the best hit there was 4 metres at 118 grams per tonne. Now these are just the 4 metre concepts. We haven't got the 1 metre breakdowns of these yet. They're only quite hot off the press. Of the 30 holes we drilled, 12 of the holes had 2 gram metres or better in them. And so for a first pass program, we reckon that's a pretty good strike rate. And so this is obviously a project that's going to be of ongoing interest to us going forward. Moving across to the Allamber project now very quickly. We originally went in here because there was a uranium deposit that was discovered by the French Total back in the late 70s, early 80s, down here at Cleo's. We believe there was potential that hadn't been looked at for uranium beyond that, so we started drilling there last year. While looking for uranium, we had some good uranium intercepts, but also had some pretty interesting copper. We've got this one, 7 metres, almost 10% copper, which is in oxide at the Lucas project. And then at the South Cliff prospect, we've also had both good zones of uranium that seem to have good continuity both at depth and along strike, but also some good copper sulphide hits. We've gone and drilled a few other zones along that trend, and we've had up to 19 metres, almost 2% copper at the Hattrick project. All these red areas that you're seeing all the way up there and in here represent copper anomalism from soil sampling that's greater than 200 ppm copper. The trouble we have, every hole we're drilling there is hitting quite significantly anomalous copper. We're getting sort of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 metre zones of going several thousand ppm copper, and we don't have a means of really narrowing ourselves in at this stage. And we've got this 20 kilometre plus trend up through here that seems to be copper rich the whole way. The largest copper anomaly there at our Brumby prospect hasn't been drilled at all yet. And so, it's an area that looks particularly exciting, but one we're just sitting back on at the moment and just thinking about what our strategy is going to be, because the copper is so widespread and there's not quite the same distinct obvious target with some of the other prospects. Conscious of time, so I'll move pretty quickly. This Nalia Basin project in Central Australia. What we're looking at here is a big sedimentary basin just to the south of 2 major hot granites that have a fairly significant uranium content. In fact, according to Geoscience Australia, they're the largest hot granites in Australia. You've got some significant uranium deposits around the margin, including Bigley, which is the JV between Energy Metals and Paladin. It has about 30 million pounds. That's now controlled by China Guangdong Nuclear Power Corp, who took over Energy Metals a couple of years ago. We're exploring the central part of the basin here, and we've defined over 400 linear kilometres of paleochannel mineralisation, which is the first significant discovery of paleochannel in the NT. We've done only a limited amount of drilling in one area we're calling the Afghan Swan prospect. And if you look at the geophysics there, this is Tempest EM. And we're using that to define the channels. We've gone in and drilled, and virtually every hole we've done in the implied channel has hit uranium mineralisation. The little blue dots are those below 100 ppm. Everything else has got significant uranium mineralisation, including some bonanza hits. So again, it's quite an exciting project, but it's on a massive scale, and this is one we're looking to bring a JV partner into. We have about 3,000 plus square kilometres just in that central part, over 400 linear kilometres of exploration of paleochannels defined. It's one that we feel is a bit too much for us to push forward at the moment, but it offers scale that's big enough to attract one of the majors from the uranium sector in. So my time's sped up, I'll leave it there, but just to sum up, Thundelarra is a mineral exploration company. I think we've had a great degree of success in recent years. A few setbacks due to some external factors like Fukushima and the general markets, but we've continued to deliver some great results. And so if you've got an appetite for investing in exploration companies, we think we've got a bit to offer. So thank you very much for your time.